am Femi OK. You're watching the stream. On this episode, who and what is causing serious ethnic conflicts in Ethiopia? I have hosted this show long enough to know that Ethiopians are astute analysts. Use our YouTube comment section, be part of the program. You are very much part of this discussion.
The increasing violence in Ethiopia, particularly in Western Oromia, as well as in Tigray, poses significant risks for civilians. First of all, as more and more people begin to organize along ethnic lines and mobilize accordingly, this poses risks that what has thus far been somewhat contained episodes of violence will start to spread throughout the country. Second of all, as Ethiopia approaches general elections, potentially later this year, the overall political instability combined with the uncertainty of how elections will run opens up the potentiality for a much worsening situation when it comes to this type of violence.
One comment, your comments are very welcome. You can do so on Twitter and on YouTube. I have to let you know that every single time we have a conversation about Ethiopia, we do ask the government to participate. We asked them again, we reached out, we had absolutely no response. But I am very happy to introduce you to our three guests, Zacharias, Awol and Tewodros. Good to have you here on the stream. Welcome back to all of you three gentlemen. Zacharias, introduce yourself, reintroduce yourself, tell our stream audience who you are, what you do.
It's nice to see you again, Femi. So I'm Zacharias Zelalem. I'm a freelance journalist and contributor to Al Jazeera and The Telegraph and other outlets. Good to have you. Hello, Awol. Reintroduce yourself to our audience. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Awol Alo. I am a senior lecturer in law at Kiel University in the UK. I'm also a political analyst for the Horn of Africa, focusing on Ethiopia.
Thank you for being on the stream. And Tewodros, good to have you back on the stream. Remind our audience who you are and what you do.
Femi, thank you for having me on. My name is Tewodros Terfe. I'm the chairman of Amhara Association of America. We are an advocacy group here in the United States. We work with the United States government to inform them on policy towards Ethiopia, and also with international human rights organizations to make them aware of any human rights atrocities that are being committed in Ethiopia, primarily against Amharas, but also across other groups as well.
Tewodros, the focus of a lot of the news coverage out of Ethiopia is on conflict, atrocities happening in the northern part of the country, or reports of atrocities happening in the northern part of the country. But you are concerned about what's happening in the west part of Ethiopia. In March, what have you heard about? What have you seen?
Well, Femi, I really appreciate you bringing attention to this humanitarian crisis that has received very little attention from the international human rights community and the broader Western media. Unfortunately, what we are seeing in the western part of the country is an alarming increase in the targeted attacks against Amharas by the Oromo Liberation Army, which is in armed conflict with the Ethiopian government, and Gumuz militias. In the first 3 months of 2021 alone, over 250 Amharas have been massacred by the Oromo Liberation Army, and hundreds of thousands have been displaced from the Oromia region, Metekel zone of the Benishangul Gumuz region, and now even in the Amhara region. So if I can just point out to a few of these attacks, in the latest violence that occurred that started on March 19th and lasted almost a week, the Oromo Liberation Army made their way all the way to the Amhara region, the North Shore zone of the Amhara region, and began to indiscriminately shoot at civilians, which lasted almost a week. Over 100 were killed, thousands wounded, lots of damage to property. The Ethiopian military had to come in to respond to this violence because the Amhara regional forces were overwhelmed. Earlier this month, on March 6th, the Oromo Liberation Army raided a village while the Amharas were having church service. They killed the priest. They abducted 30 Amharas to the bushes, killed 24. This was followed up again on March 9th when the Oromo Liberation Army killed 25 Amharas in the same area. Mm-hmm. On March 13th, a dozen were killed. And so this has been ongoing, and really there's no serious attempt by the federal government and the Oromia regional government or the Benishangul Gumuz regional government to halt these attacks against vulnerable, innocent people in these regions.
Let me just go to Zacharias. Zacharias, I'm just looking at a story that you wrote where you were trying to get in touch with some of the victims. Have a look here on my laptop. Worsening violence in Western Ethiopia, forcing civilians to flee. What is the context in which we can understand better what Tewodros is explaining? Why would civilians be being attacked right now? Zacharias, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess what we've seen play out over the course of the past few weeks and months, some of the massacres that Tewodros referred to, they're the result of something like 2 years' worth of deteriorating tensions and a worsening security situation since the launch of a military crackdown in the area by the Ethiopian army to uproot elements of the Oromo Liberation Army. However, it's led to what started with what was initially a low-scale insurgency has developed into a humanitarian disaster, perhaps not something that's on the same scale as what we are seeing in Tigray over the course of the past few months. However, it is of a scale that is not to be neglected, and we've seen the different factions of the war carry out gross human rights violations that have been verified by the likes of Amnesty International. And then, of course, when it comes to the protection of civilians, we are seeing time and time again those whose mandate it is to protect civilian populations, such as regional security forces or the federal army, have chosen to or have displayed an inability to perform their duties. So it has led to mass displacement. I'm not able to verify the statistics for the Wallagga region. However, easily into the thousands may have been displaced between February and March alone, and with no concrete solution yet to amend ties between the different factions. The situation may yet be exacerbated.
Oh, I want to play a comment to you because this is analysis from our broader community online. And come off the back of this, react immediately. You don't have to agree with it, but I'm interested in your take. Let's have a listen.
Ethiopia at this moment, the Amhara ethnic group are murdered violently. There is a genocide going on in Matakal, Wallagga, and Adaye. This genocide is carried out by extremist OLF group, and the government of Ethiopia keeps silent. Amharas are killed every day. This genocide has to stop, and the UN has to intervene and stop this genocide. Please, 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 the people can't wait anymore.
Oh.
I think, I think there is no doubt that Ethiopia over the last 2 years has become a scene of utter mayhem, and civilians have become the casualties as a result of the violence that we see up and down the country. But I think it's important to remember that the violence that we see today actually started in Western Oromia and Southern Oromia in 2019 as things politically changed in the country. The nature of the violence changed. Yes, Amhara civilians have been targeted in certain areas, but there is absolutely no indication from the evidence that I have seen that they were targeted simply on account of being Amharas, let alone that there is an Amhara genocide that is going on. Genocide means, you have to have the intent to bring about the extermination of that particular group in whole or in part in order for this to constitute an act of genocide. But I think it's important to kind of situate the debate in Ethiopia in its broader context and understand what is actually driving this violence. What you have in Ethiopia is two contrasting visions of the future. And this vision resulting into a major violence. Let me finish. So on the one hand, what you have is a vision that wants to centralize the Ethiopian state and dismantle the current multinational federal system that exists in the country. And this vision is primarily promoted by the Prime Minister and the majority of the Amhara ethnic group, including those who do not support the Prime Minister. On the other hand,
so if I can
I'm going to give you one more sentence because we can't do lectures. We have to have a conversation. Sorry. Finish the thought, but finish it swiftly. Go ahead.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that the violence that we see here in Ethiopia is a manifestation of these clashes of conflict, clashes of vision of the future between the various groups in Ethiopia. But in terms of the allegations that have been made that there is a genocide going on against Amhara,
a different vision for Ethiopia. That is why you think there is violence happening. Tewodos, go ahead, please.
Sure. Thank you, Femi. A few things here real quick. Number one, it is, I think it's undeniable that Amharas are being targeted by the Oromo Liberation Army and also in Matakel by the Gumuz militias. In February, the Gumuz regional government finally admitted that senior level government officials were complicit in supporting the Gumuz militias in attacking and targeting Amharas, Agaus, and those Ethiopians that they consider as settlers, non-native to the region. And we believe the same thing is happening in the Oromia region. Tens of thousands of Amharas have been displaced from the Oromia region because they are being targeted. If you ask the victims who are targeting them,
this is a good point.
Yes.
This is a good point for me to bring in. I'm just going to show you this. This is a statement that was sent to Al Jazeera, and also it was inspired by a piece that Zacharias wrote, and they responded, the Oromo Liberation Army responded. So this is the piece that you're seeing. I want to actually put it up on screen so you can see the video there of it. And then we actually spoke to them in more detail, and this is what they told the stream. Have a look, have a listen.
An independent body has to be given an access to areas alleged and always beyond ready to cooperate for investigation. Ethiopia is collapsing while the world is looking for a wrong medicine to save the country when it's too little too late. Failing to accept the realities as the cause of Ethiopia's demise today is a deliberate marginalization of the Oromo mass and distorting a century-long quest for self-determination of the Oromo nation and other oppressed nationalities in the country will result into an inevitable disintegration of those independent states. Today, neither Abiy Ahmed's deception nor international community's foul cry will save the plight of the nations of Ethiopia. Situations on the ground are far from what the world is observing on the TV screens. Things are out of control, and an unlawfully declared state of emergency in almost all parts of the country solved nothing. That is today a sign of proof that shows Ethiopia is a failed state.
Zacharias, Ethiopia is a failed state. Also, I find disturbing that nobody ever admits to any of the atrocities. Nobody admits to them. Zacharias, go ahead.
Well, I'll leave the characterizations perhaps to the legal experts and those who are more fit to comment on those things, like Awel. However, it goes without question that there's been a lack of accountability and massive failures by both the regional and the federal judicial systems to hold those who are behind some of the heinous crimes against ethnic Amharas and other populations in the area for reasons that go beyond logic. So something like 50 people, for instance, killed over the course of February and March, mostly in the Horoguduru district of Oromia. And the governor there, Mr. Bekkele Dechasa, he made no mention of the victims. He did not even issue a statement of condolences via his multiple communications pages. What it has done is systematically normalize such violence. And with the violence, with the killings of something like 50 people normalized, I mean, you can only feel pessimistic about where the country as a whole is leading. So in that sense, you can definitely point to spectacular failures by multiple parties.
So gentlemen, I am going to go to YouTube. There is so much to talk about on YouTube, and I'm going to ask you to be fast and swift and quick. All of the same word. I'm overemphasizing it because I need you to be speedy. No long debates here.
Sure.
Umar, the increasing violence in Ethiopia is linked to the political failures of the transition. Awal, thoughts? Go ahead.
I think that is precisely the point I was making earlier when I talked about contrasting visions of the future. You have the prime minister who came to power on the back of primarily the struggle of the Oromo people. And once he has consolidated power, he essentially betrayed the Oromo national question, including people who have worked so hard with him to bring about the change. And now this prime minister is trying to single-handedly impose his own personal vision of the future, and that is what is driving the violence that we're talking about.
No, I think I have to respond here. Thank you, Femi. So the Prime Minister Abiy is not trying to have a unitary form of government, as Awal is alluding to. If anything, it's vastly different. He allowed the Sidama ethnic group to vote for their own referendum, to have their own regional statehood. In addition, allow me to finish, please.
So I hear the debate. I'm moving on with more of our YouTube comments because we have so many Ethiopians who want to talk to you. And I should also say, I just want to reiterate, we invited the Ethiopian government to be part of this program. They chose not to engage with us on this occasion. Let me put this one to you, Zacharias. This is from Belata B. Thank you. Ethiopia won't go in deep ethnic conflict like we saw in Rwanda. Those vulture politicians like to see that so as to take their share of the brutally torn apart Ethiopia. So basically they're saying there's not going to be an Ethiopia like there was a Rwanda, not expecting that level of conflict. Zacharias, what an awful thing to even talk about as an Ethiopian. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, well, it's still speculation, so obviously I wouldn't comment on that specifically, but I think the saddest part of all is the fact that it's political jostling amongst the representatives and the elites of various political factions that has led to the worsening of tensions, and yet it's the innocent people who have no role whatsoever in that political jostling that are paying the price with their lives and with their livelihoods. Scores of ethnic Amhara farmers being slaughtered in various parts of the country. They had no role in whatever Abiy or representatives of various Amhara or Oromo organizations said in various communiques or on various platforms, and yet the colossal loss of life that they are forced to shoulder is unbearable. It's something that should scar us as a society. And yet, as a society, we're focused more on trivial bickering, and that has also prevented us from really dealing with the situation, dealing with what should be key to the conversation, the massive loss of life. So whether or not the political issues that divide Ethiopians get solved or not, it seems that we can look at a future where we'll see more instances of mass slaughter of innocent people for no good reason whatsoever. So in that sense, I guess you might be able to make some comparisons to, well, Rwanda, I guess, if that's what the commentator said.
Right. On March the 9th, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed talked to the African Union about what was happening in Ethiopia, primarily talking about the northern part of Ethiopia. I want you to see part of this statement because it's really relevant to what we're talking about right now in terms of ethnic conflicts and the problems that are happening all through Ethiopia. These are some of the issues that jumped out at us, and the idea that Prime Minister is saying that Ethiopia is still in transition. There's still a lot of work to be done. I am just wondering here, gentlemen, how do you get out of this situation where we have Amhara civilians being targeted, that there is an ongoing conflict between the Oromo Liberation Army and the government? In Tigray and the government, there is another conflict there. All of these spots where people are being killed, atrocities are happening. How do you get out of that? Tewodros, Thoughts?
Well, first, Femi, we must have sympathy and empathy for these victims. As Zacharias was alluding to, they're not part of this political. Political wrangling, and so that's the first thing. And make the protection of the civilians a priority. We need leadership from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to work with the nonviolent political actors, civil society, and religious leaders to move us away from this targeted ethnic attacks against innocent people and from this ethnic division that we have and this ethnic system that pits ethnic groups against one another to a system where all Ethiopians are equal, where all Ethiopians are not second-class citizens because some Ethiopians are not second-class citizens if they live outside of their so-called ethnic regions. And that's what we have right now. And so that's really what we need is real leadership and empathy and sympathy and a plan and a vision to get us away from this ethnic-based system that has divided the Ethiopian people. And this is a system that was really forced on the Ethiopian people by the TPLF regime. The TPLF is gone. This system should go along with them.
There is a lot of support, gentlemen. Excuse me, Awal. There's a lot of support, gentlemen, for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. There's a lot of opposition to him as well. I want you to hear a voice who's pretty optimistic about how Ethiopia can get out of this. Awal, then you can comment off the back of that. Let's have a listen.
The ultimate goal of OLF and TPLF is creating chaos in Ethiopia by inflicting ethnic conflict between the two biggest ethnic groups, Amhara and Oromo. Actually, they're thinking that the best strategy to weaken Ethiopia is the weakening of the Amharas. Even though it's very difficult, if Prime Minister Abiy takes serious measures on his party officials, I'm optimistic that he will be able to retake over the situation very soon.
Optimism in this conversation. Do you have optimism, Awal? Go ahead.
No, I don't. I can tell you, Femi, that today in Ethiopia, the stench of disintegration is in the air, and it is so thick that anyone with a very basic understanding of politics in Ethiopia can actually smell it. Who today can look Tigrayans in the eye after all the atrocities, after Eritrean forces were allowed to come into Ethiopia, violate civilians, violate the honor and dignity of Tigrayan mothers and women, would look Tigrayan in the eye and say their future lies with Ethiopia. This war, like the other wars that we are talking about, was about imposing a particular vision of the future on the Ethiopian people, the kind of vision that Tedros is talking about, which is the kind of post-ethnic system. You cannot have a post-ethnic system in Ethiopia because that means return to the past. And that past was a system in which a single culture, a single language, a single religion dominated Ethiopia. And consolidating Ethiopia around an Amhara cultural core would only lead to further violence and chaos in Ethiopia. So the best way, I think, for everyone is to take stock of where we are at the moment and try to find a way forward. A national dialogue could provide a pathway towards the future, but in the final analysis, the question of what kind of society we should have in Ethiopia should be decided by the Ethiopian people, not by a prime minister and not by a single ethnic group.
And Femi, please allow me to interject real quick. First, let's all understand that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is an Oromo. So when Ewal Olo alludes to this is what Amharas want, Amharas are very proud of the diverse ethnic heritage and culture of Ethiopia. And we want an Ethiopia where all Ethiopians are equal regardless of where they live in the country. That's not what we have right now. We have a situation where if you do not live in your ethnic region, you're a second-class citizen. And that's what we have. And that's why these people are vulnerable and they're easy targets for these armed groups. And so we do need a national dialogue, but we need a national dialogue with the non-violent actors.
If you will.
And those armed groups that are being violent and targeting vulnerable people, they need to be held accountable and brought to justice.
Tedros, thank you. Thank you so much. Awal, thank you. Zacharias, thank you. Every time we have a conversation about Ethiopia, there is so much more to be said on YouTube. In your hundreds waiting to comment. Thank you so much. I only managed to do a little bit and bring a little bit of what you had to say into this conversation, but I know our conversation will continue. Thanks for watching this episode of The Stream. See you next time.